now we know that the null object is gonna affect these objects that are parented to it. And I'm sorry, I keep referring to them as objects instead of layers. They are layers, they're not objects, but I'm just used to 3D terms. So what I'm going to do here is to duplicate these to make a copy of them, because what I want to do next is to have a copy of these two corners to be flipped to the other side and keeping a copy of them in the same place. So duplicate, but the duplication is going to carry over the parenting. So what I need to do is, while I have these selected, I need to go to the parent and go on none. And this ensures that when I move the null object, it's not going to move all of them. It's only going to move 2 corners instead of 4 corners. Okay, so I'm going to undo. What I want to do now is to have this null object to be flipped to the other side. So technically, if I go to the scale of that null object, and if I unlink, and if I do this, then it's going to do the same kind of scenario. So that's good. But before I do so, I need to make sure that the null object is precisely on the same line. And also, I want to make sure that I would create a similar gap to this one here. So just to memorize and make sure that I have 20 shifts. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So obviously it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it's going to be 20. That's good. Now, here is the null object. And if I click and hold and, sorry, if I click the left mouse button to translate and then click and hold shift and then move it, I see here that it's precisely, almost precisely, maybe shift down to 2. Yeah, okay. So it is 2 shifts up higher than it should be. And either way, I'm going to have to do that translation shifts after I invert the scale of that null object. So I'm gonna go here, and as I mentioned before, I don't even care to read the number, whether it's 100 whatsoever. I just go to the very beginning and hit minus, so it's gonna flip it to the other side. So instead of pushing it up 20 times, I'm gonna push it up only 18, because this was already 2 pushes higher. Shift and upper arrow 18 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So now I have a full face. The best thing to do right now is, as usual, is to save this. Control Shift S. Okay, so now that I have a full face, what I'm going to do is to take this null object and duplicate it. And you will notice that this is not gonna be ideal, because once we do duplicate it, if we were to move that null object, it's just a duplicated null object. So the point is, we need something now different than a null object, because the null object was only helping us on being a good parent, moving all those corners together the way we want them and whatsoever. But if I were to take that null object and delete it, and now everything is in their place, and we have good corners and whatsoever, now this is the time to pre-compose this face. Okay, so how do we pre-compose? Shortcut is Control Shift C. The non-shortcut would be right mouse button and then pre-compose. And then we're gonna name this one face. Okay, so now that it's pre-composed, you will notice that the pre-composition is gonna make a whole scene out of this, instead of just being contained by those layers. So while the solution is simple, it may bring some issues. The solution would be using the region of interest. So right now we are inside the full composition of this project, and we do have this pre-composition, right? So if we double click inside that pre-composition, we would notice that, hey, we have all of these layers that we want to work with and all this, but we have this whole composition here, and this pre-composition is not really being great because instead of making the markers or the borders of this face to be only strictly to that face, it's actually making the selection all over. So if we were to try to solve the problem from here while viewing the pre-composition from an external view, using the region of interest would give us an issue. And I'm not going to demonstrate that because it may confuse you if you're learning this for the first time especially. So the right way to do it is to go inside the pre-composition. So in After Effects, to go inside the pre-composition, you would just double click on that pre-composition. And now that we're here, I'm going to go and use the region of interest. And I'm going to zoom in so I would be precise as possible. And I'm gonna go here into the corner, and then with the left mouse button I'm gonna drag and make that precise as possible kind of region. So this is the region of interest that interests us inside this pre-composition. Okay, so once we do that, what do we do next? Do we click enter, space, backspace, whatever? What we need to do is to go to the composition, crop comp to region of interest. So right now this is what it has, and you can sort of like investigate and make sure if it's like precisely perfect whatsoever. This is good enough for me, at least for this example. So now if I go to the main composition, check it out. This is our pre-composition. It's really nicely contained. It's moving everything together, and now it's gonna make an ideal face that we can duplicate and go through. So at this point, this is a great step to save. Before I continue, I just want to mention a few things that I would like to clarify and bring up for general information about this process or about using After Effects. So something you noticed me doing before, I just want to make sure in case someone was wondering. If you hit B, if you select a layer and you hit B, that would give you the position. If you hit S, it would give you the scale. If you hit A, it would give you the anchor point. But if you want to have multiple ones, let's say the position and the scale, which is a very regular use to have multiple ones, especially position and scale, at least for me, you can hit B, and instead of going and changing, like clicking S, which would replace it, instead you click and hold Shift, and then so now right now I have scale, so I'm gonna click and hold Shift and then P, so it's gonna add it to that list. The second thing that I think could help when you want to investigate if you really have a precise selection for the face, you can pretty much change the background color. And the reason why I want to bring this up, because generally people would say, okay, you can just go here and create a new solid. The shortcut is Control Y. And once you create a solid, you can say, I'm just going to make it like super bright green, right? Then you hit OK, and then you make sure it's at the bottom so you can see through it. And now we can easily see here my mistake, right? And here. So it's not super precise. Okay, so that's good. If you want to change the color of a solid, in case you didn't know, instead of Control Y to create a solid, the shortcut to change the settings would be Control Shift Y, and then you can change the color whatsoever. But with that said, what if you don't want to create a solid? What if you want to, for instance, for the entire project, you're dealing with that problem and you just want to have a universal way of changing the whole background color? Well, when you originally create a composition, you are by default going to have a black background. So if you hit Control K, that's going to give you the composition settings. And here is an area where you can actually change the background color, which you can see changing instantly. So I'm going to hit cancel so it wouldn't change. But these are two pieces of information that I wanted to make sure that I cover in this exercise. Okay, now with that said, I'm going to hit A. I always like to hit the anchor point to clear the attributes here because it's the easiest. With that said, what I want to do now is to take this composition and I'm going to duplicate it over and over. And just like I did with the corner here, what I want to do is first changing the anchor point. So I would definitely go with changing the anchor point from here instead of going with the Y or this tool here, because once I click on this one, I would have to click, and if I click and hold shift, it would do the job, would be helpful and whatsoever, but it's requiring me to move it and click and hold shift and move that. But if I do it from here, it's probably going to be much cleaner and safer, I guess. So after I move it, I would make sure that I move here and it's precisely where it should be. So with that said, now we're going to face a very interesting problem, but it's gonna come, so don't worry about it. So what I want to do now is to go into the 3D view.